Now we're going to talk about our special right triangles. There's two right triangles that are very common, and so we memorize the numbers outside of those triangles. So draw these triangles in your notes, and we're going to put numbers on the outside of them. And this is just to remember your special ratios. So look at your 30, 60, 90 triangle. The number across from 30, we're going to make that side length a 1. The hypotenuse, the side across from your 90, is going to be a 2. And if you do Pythagorean theorem, you would get the square root of 3. So the side across from 60 is radical 3. So you need to memorize that. Across from 30 is 1. Opposite of 60 is radical 3. Opposite of 90 is always a 2. Then you also have your 45, 45, 90 triangle. Opposite of your 45s are each 1s. So 1s for the legs, and if you do Pythagorean theorem, you get radical 2. So across from 90 is a radical 2. Now, using that, we're going to find the 6 trig functions of 30, 60, and 45. So let's look at 30 degrees. The sine of 30 is the opposite over the hypotenuse, which is going to be, now we're focused on 30 as our reference angle. So opposite of 30 is the 1, the hypotenuse is 2. Then we're going to do the cosine of 30. That's adjacent over hypotenuse, the adjacent side. So the side that touches 30 is radical 3, and the hypotenuse is 2. Tangent of 30 degrees, opposite over adjacent. Opposite is 1. The adjacent is radical 3. Just like in the previous example, you need to multiply by a matching radical to move your radical out of the denominator. So I get radical 3 over 3 for that. Then you do your reciprocal functions. So cosecant of 30, you take the sine and you flip it. So 2 over 1, which is 2. Secant of 30 is cosine flipped, so it's going to be 2 over radical 3. And we need to move the radical out of the denominator. So multiply by radical 3, and you get 2 rad 3 over 3. Then find your cotangent. Cotangent is tangent flipped. I'm going to flip the green so that the radical goes on top, and then I don't have to move it. If I were to flip the pink, I would get 3 over radical 3, and then I'd have to get rid of the radical again. So I'm just going back to the first answer we got before we got rid of our radical. So those are the 6 trig functions for 30. Now let's do the same thing for 60. So we're going to do sine of 60. Now, how does that change? It means we're looking at a different spot. So instead of focusing on 30 as our reference, we're now focused on 60 as our reference. So when we do opposite over hypotenuse, the opposite is radical 3. The hypotenuse is still 2. When we do cosine, the cosine of 60 is going to be the adjacent over the hypotenuse. Adjacent to 60 is the 1, because the 1 is right next to it. So 1 over 2. Tangent of 60 is the opposite over the adjacent. Opposite is radical 3. Adjacent is 1. So you get radical 3. And then we're going to find the reciprocals. So cosecant of 60 is going to be 2 over radical 3. If you flip sine's fraction upside down, you're going to need to rationalize it. So multiply by radical 3 so that you don't have a radical in the denominator. Then we're going to find the secant of 60, which is cosine upside down, so 2 over 1. And then find the cotangent of 60, which is going to be tangent upside down, reciprocal of tangent. Move your radical. So you get radical 3 over 3. And so those are the 6 trig functions for 60. And last for this, we're going to find the 6 trig functions for 45. So we're going to find sine of 45. So now we're looking at the 45, 45, 90 triangle. You can choose either 45 angle to be your reference. It doesn't matter which one. So the sine of 45, if I look at my triangle, the opposite is 1, and the hypotenuse is radical 2. So I'm going to need to rationalize that. So I get radical 2 over 2. Cosine of 45 is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. Adjacent to 45 is also 1, and the hypotenuse is radical 2. So you need to rationalize that, multiply by radical 2, so you get radical 2 over 2. The tangent of 45 is the opposite divided by the adjacent. So opposite of 45 is 1, adjacent to 45 is also 1, so you get 1. Or you can leave it 1 over 1. And then you find your trig function, or your reciprocal functions. So cosecant 45 is reciprocal of sine, but like earlier, I'm going to flip the green one before I move to the radical, so that I don't have to move the radical from the bottom. So it's going to be radical 2 over 1. You can leave it over 1, or you can just write radical 2. Secant of 45, I'm going to flip the green, so radical 2 over 1. And then cotangent of 45 is still 1 over 1, which is 1. So those are your 6 trig functions for 45.